If you are on the spiritual journey, then you have surely noticed that the stages of awakening that come with the spiritual journey really trigger different depths, and that this journey of awakening repeatedly ventures into areas where we sometimes feel scared, or it goes into very uncomfortable realms. And that's why I would really like to do a podcast episode about it today, because I am increasingly receiving messages from you, noticing how realities overlap, how you enter dark areas and don't quite know how to deal with them, about the topic in the current context and the implications it has on our daily lives and how we perceive them. And yes, just realizing that awakening indeed also includes truly beautiful aspects, but not only that. In fact, it encompasses so much more. And today, I would really like to take away your fear, because ultimately, you can only encounter yourself. And what exactly that means, how profound it is for you, and most importantly, how you can deeply support yourself with this insight and truly accompany your own awakening process in depth. That's what today's podcast episode is all about. Because especially in the spiritual realm, spiritual patterns and spiritual dogmas are usually extremely hindering for the awakening process, which can be significant obstacles in the process of awakening, making it more challenging and difficult. I wish you a lot of joy with this Live Happily podcast episode. My name is Linda Giese, and I have been a spiritual mentor for 22 years and the author of the book Consciousness Next Level. By the way, I have linked it for you here in the text. I am also the founder of the Being Potential method. Being potentials, if that definitely interests you, are definitely your intrinsic motivators and strengths that you were given in this life. They support you clearly on your awakening journey, providing detailed guidance and assistance at every step of the way, and help you always and everywhere to solve all your challenges in the best possible way and in one go. They act like a navigator for you, ensuring that you are always on the right path in your life, offering direction, clarity, unwavering support, wisdom, and guidance. If you want to know more about it, feel free to join us in our next free live show. I have linked the link for you here in this podcast episode for additional information and details. And if you want, feel free to just tuck your biggest problem, your greatest challenge under your arm and bring it along. With a bit of luck, we might even talk to each other about your challenges and solve them for you using our method, showing you how we can help. Yes, and give you great support so that you leave this live show saying, wow, that was a real benefit for me. Now I have understood the dynamics of my challenge and solved it once and for all. So I would be happy if you could join me. Let's get back to the topic. Help. I'm indeed awakening. Yes, what's happening to me? Why am I literally experiencing such spooky changes in reality? In the last few podcast episodes, we talked in great detail and at length about reality overlaps. We thoroughly discussed how we can shift realities and how to deal with it when it just happens to us. We also worked through the topics in detail and thoroughly using your examples on the topics that were covered in the session, which was held on YouTube Live this past Wednesday evening. Today, we are going to have a discussion about the various areas in our lives where we might feel as though we are emotionally falling into a deep, dark hole. Yes, it is indeed very often the case that when we awaken, we truly experience incredible states of intense heat. We understand connections, realizing that the reality we previously perceived as real is not complete, that there is much more to see, perceive, and consider. And these are indeed very fascinating and often very beautiful processes, truly amazing. But along with that, we also repeatedly experience that we in fact sometimes plunge into a darkness, for example. We might even have interactions with dark energies, perhaps experiences of darkness, soul depths, and abysmal experiences. And I would very much like to tell you about this using an example. I worked with a client the other day, and he demonstrated a fascinating and insightful story that I would like to share with you in detail. I want to invite you to follow along with an open heart and mind, as this story has many layers and valuable lessons that can be learnt from it. Of course, I hope that as few of you as possible have to identify with this story one to one, but because it goes very deep, it can be a good guide for you on how to best handle it if something similar happens to you. This particular customer confided in me that he had been trapped in what he described as a deep, dark black hole for a little over 4 days, feeling utterly lost and isolated. He even had to cancel the meticulously planned trip that he was eagerly looking forward to taking because he found himself completely unable to help himself in any way, shape, or form. He felt, he says, told me that it was as if a force, an energy was pulling him down. He also had a very hard time moving. He spent a lot of time, let's say, on the couch or in bed, and his world was dark. He said it was very clear that it wasn't a classic depression. Yes, rather it felt to him like an energy that took hold of him from the outside. I also like to share this example with all of you today because we currently have a lot of released dark energy in the field. And indeed, some of us come into contact with it quite frequently as well. This means that the released energy resonates deeply with us, aligning with our natural frequencies. This resonance creates and as soon as we resonate with it in our lives and emotions and feelings, we can also experience darkness. And he explained that he felt deeply like a victim, especially when it came to dealing with this type of energy, as he had no control over it. He couldn't help himself with any of his techniques, no matter how hard he tried. He couldn't even ask for help, not even once. He found himself exposed to a force that was utterly powerless, yet incredibly destructive. This dark, ominous power, as he often referred to it, seemed to drain the very... And he also became afraid because the room or his apartment seemed to have an effect. She has a very nice apartment, but it really looked like a dump. So he also said that reality seemed to have changed. He viewed himself as an extremely bad and morally flawed person, someone who had made many mistakes and as neglected in a way that was severely and deeply impoverished and as inferior as it was, in every possible way. He was indeed also extremely hard on himself. He truly felt how this dark force had taken complete control over his thoughts like a powerful force. And he also felt how this force was trying to take control of his mind in various ways and forms. This force tried to influence his thoughts, urging him to harm himself in various ways. So that's very extreme. Yes, exactly. But let's calmly dive into it. Let's also calmly face the whole thing. Yes. Because once again, the reassuring phrase, you can only meet yourself, as we know, in the end, ultimately. And in this story, there is indeed a very therapeutic and healing resolution. So truly have courage and stay with it. Who knows when you might need it, at any moment. And he told me about this in a deeply emotional and heartfelt way. He was still very attached to this experience and about it. And I let him talk, and I let him finish speaking. He described everything to me in great depth, highlighting all its dramatic aspects and his sense of helplessness. And during our conversation, at some point, I turned to him and asked what the ticket to this fascinating journey was. I wanted to know the cost of embarking on such an incredible adventure. Yes, if there was definitely a specific trigger event. And he told me that he is very convinced that there was. Absolutely. Indeed. He had been dealing with the quite recent and unfortunate issue of the brutal stabbing incident, where a police officer also lost his life. And he had also watched the entire video of this tragic stabbing incident involving a police officer. Here we clearly and undoubtedly have the question for each and every one of us. What are you occupying yourself with? Yes, in his particular case, it was extremely beneficial because it provided us with the opportunity to work on a project that was directly related to him. And he mentioned that when he watched the video, he experienced a profound sense of sadness that seemed to rise within him. Alongside this sadness, he also felt a strong anger, a deep-seated despair, and a pervasive sense of uncertainty. The video evoked he felt deeply and profoundly, he sensed how he no longer feels safe and secure in our country, and how utterly and completely powerless he is in the face of it all. And he was confronted with his fear, with the feeling of not being safe, and with his powerlessness. And he also mentioned the word oppression. So those were the feelings that this video of the stabbing triggered in him. And that was his ticket into a journey of darkness, facing mysterious challenges. I then, of course, worked with him. I'm trying to keep this really brief so that it's understandable. So we found out where he knows these feelings of oppression, powerlessness, not being safe, anger, and fear from his own childhood. After a detailed investigation, we have discovered the reason or the cause behind the issue. During his childhood, the periods felt incredibly long, filled with many moments where he was constantly exposed to a variety of intense feelings and emotions. He found it very interesting that we absolutely uncovered this because he said it was too extreme. And I always told myself and truly absolutely convinced myself that I had a happy childhood indeed. But he says, now I realize that this is not true at all. I was completely cut off from my feelings. I couldn't feel anything at all. I also couldn't talk about feelings at all before. We then naturally moved on to find out that this powerlessness and suppression, this fear, this despair were so severe for him that it was safer for him to dissociate from these perceptions and escape into a pseudo world of loyalty, where he was more loyal to the cause of these feelings, in this case a parent, and even went so far as to glorify this person. We then found out that it was ultimately vital for him as a small child because his life depended on this person, on this parent, who was always there for him, providing support, care, and love, ensuring his well-being and safety. So this disconnection from his true perceptions, which stemmed from these deeply traumatic experiences he endured during his childhood, ultimately ensured his survival. These experiences were so profoundly, but this traumatic experience, this overwhelming sense of darkness, this despair, and this feeling of helplessness, this anger that he couldn't move past, that seemed to consume him entirely, leading even to resignation, and left him in a state of it all remains. It was a pitch dark room so completely devoid of light that one could barely see their own hand in front of their face. Figuratively speaking, it was as if his inner child, the innocent and carefree part of him, was still trapped there. And through this video, these deep and profound feelings that had been buried within him for so long began to surface. They pulled at his consciousness, drawing his attention away from his adult, everyday awareness. It was as if his mind was being transported, so to speak, into a different realm, a split-off part of his. And he just went through this incredibly intense and demonic darkness for what felt like an eternity, though it was just a few days. During this period, he had to firmly believe, from his own perception and understanding, that some external dark forces, possibly supernatural or, of course, it took him quite a long while to fully comprehend everything because he got deeply involved in the matter a bit more. That was just part of our work, that he really felt the same way as a child before he separated from it, split off from it, as he felt now in this dark trip, a journey filled with uncertainty and shadows. Yes, and that there were great fears of death, that he was very insecure, that he was desperate, powerless, and that these fears also suggested to him that he was not right, that he was helpless, that he was doing something wrong, and so on. So the whole range of emotions and thoughts that can be associated with it, the overwhelming sense of dread and confusion, the feeling of being lost and unable to find a way out, all of these compounded his distress. So the whole range that can be associated with it. And what is the conclusion now that we have reached this point in our discussion? How do we effectively deal with this new and profound realization that has come to light? For him, it is extremely important to be able to sense and understand in advance when these particular feelings are triggered, as it allows him to prepare and respond appropriately, and then consciously enter this cave and repair the damage that has occurred. That means we know terms like healing, actually healing the inner child, but I really mean going in and very thoroughly resolving it completely, and also taking that child out of that shell, and yes, taking it out of that darkness. And that is, of course, a very, very deep process that indeed, in my opinion, should also be extremely accompanied. So, just a quick note here, it's crucial and essential that we don't try to get rid of the negative emotions and bad feelings and just sweep everything away with light, love, and positivity, but rather that we understand, address, and resolve these emotions. By doing so, we can achieve a more genuine and lasting sense of peace and well-being. Because you can only meet and truly understand your own self when you fully awaken from the depths of your subconscious mind. Awakening is not about waking up into a realm of light and love, but rather it involves such as addressing and resolving all the misunderstandings, false beliefs, and internal conflicts that are within you. Healing your relationship with yourself, that is undoubtedly awakening. Healing your relationship with the world, that is certainly awakening. Yes, it is essential that you, as an individual, liberate yourself from all the experiences and events that have transpired in your life, from everything that has been done to you, and from all the things that have been said to you about who you are. This includes the various ways you have categorized yourself, the manner in which you have been shaped by external influences, and the narrow, limited self and worldviews that you have adopted over time. It is crucial to dissolve these restrictive perspectives, to expand your horizons, to open your mind, and to remove these limitations. This process of breaking free from these constraints and expanding your understanding is what constitutes true healing. So, and I know it might be that some people have already definitely, probably, perhaps lost interest and tuned out of the video early because they heard about darkness. If you've listened this far, congratulations, because this is a very, very, very important topic. We won't be able to avoid facing our own shadows. That's another way to put it. And above all, we often hear that what we perceive as threatening, which supposedly comes energetically from the outside, can only resonate with you because it has something to do with you. Yes, and then we definitely look in the wrong place and think, if there's so much darkness and resonance with me, where am I absolutely dark? Where am I obscure? Yes. And then we start to go down a guilty path and somehow, in fact, look for something bad in ourselves indeed. That's not accurate. Rather, it's about where you have encountered such darkness, for example, in any way. Did you feel exposed to powerlessness and fear, as in this case as a child? And what was not adequately processed with trauma sensitivity, perhaps adequately accompanied, but instead split off? And all that comes into contact with you on your path of awakening, which feels like it is from the outside, be it energies, other people, or situations that confront you. All of this points to what is still unhealed within you. Yes, and that's why it's so important that you always look there when you resolve it, especially when you take possession of your being potentials, which are the inherent capabilities and strengths within you. When you resolve the misunderstandings, the traumatic experiences, the emotional and psychological scars from the past, then you are truly free and liberated. And then the path of awakening continues from that point in a way that is meaningful and significant and transformative. We can't just sit in the corner and wait for the episode to pass, thinking, okay, it's over, now back to spiritual fairy dust. Yes, it will keep coming back until it is fully resolved. This issue is persistent and will not go away. You cannot ascend further with your inner heavy traumatic baggage, which will weigh you down. You have to solve it. Once you've solved a part of it, you can continue to ascend, you can continue to awaken. Yes, otherwise it would just be way too difficult. You would definitely go crazy because we are simply confronted with what is simply within us and around us. Just thinking if I wanted to add something, I know I wanted to say something else, but I've forgotten it now. Maybe that's all for today. I would find it very interesting if you could leave a detailed and thoughtful comment in the comment section below about your thoughts and feelings on the topic, what you perceive for yourself, and how it resonates with you personally, and whether you also feel that you keep encountering dark energies in your life. Your feedback is very valuable to us and helps us understand your perspective better. Now I remember what I wanted to say. Or even with dark people and feel how you resonate with it. whether it's in resistance, which makes you afraid. I recently told you about my experience where I was startled because I saw a person who seemed completely inhuman to me, and you commented incredibly well, sharing that you have had similar experiences. And this being indeed startled and this apprehension of it is actually naturally indeed a definite sign for me to also take a closer look. Where do I still have something there that needs to be resolved? And I have been thinking about it deeply. I have, of course, also done that and reflected on it. And I have naturally become aware that an inhumane person who lacks empathy also triggers a feeling of fear in me, because there is also a lack of assessment on my part. That means I lose control there, and it is quite unsettling. I am finding it increasingly difficult to evaluate and understand the actions and behaviors of people around me. And underlying that, of course, is indeed a very traumatic experience, which, for example, also stems from extremely severe abuse. Yes, and that means you can go a little bit deeper and bring the issues into healing for yourself, and even more. Exactly. Many people are afraid to deal with the topic of darkness, shadow work, dark and heavy energies. I understand that very well. I also prefer to avoid it. Yes, but it is so important that when it knocks, we go in empowered, self-responsible, and self-caring. This means actively taking charge of our own lives, making thoughtful decisions that are best for us, and diligently looking after our well-being. It is not sufficient to just rely on spiritual concepts such as forgiving and breathing everything away in light and love, focus only on light and love, meditate, and do everything to make this state, I'll just call it a bit casually, be breathed away or affirmed away, visualized away. That's not the point. This is extremely and significantly harmful because you don't make any progress. So face your inner struggles and challenges and demons. Now I've said it indeed, that truly terrible word. And you owe it to yourself to explore and understand, because there are many inner parts within you that reveal your true self and deepest desires. These are very lovable children from your childhood days, who you once were and who you loved dearly. And they need you very much. They only have you to rely on, and they are still stuck in those deeply fearful or traumatic issues. And you are indeed the only one who can truly bring about complete and total liberation. By the way, this is also the most beautiful part of our work, in my honest and sincere opinion, that we diligently do in our program. Because to experience how people, and I'll just say it clearly, these are in fact completely normal people like you and me, actually. We all have our traumas, and as a result, we all have our limitations, our masks, our beliefs, our behavior patterns, our fears, insecurities, and self-doubts. And when we finally manage to resolve that complex issue, a truly radiant, self-assured, and liberated being, full of confidence and freedom, emerges. And then, by the way, awakening is also a wonderfully beautiful path, because these spiritual openings unfold gradually in such a truly beautiful, valuable, and powerful way, and in a way that is incredibly meaningful. And you just feel this total guidance. You are absolutely in the flow and so connected with your own truth and the authenticity that is itself so linked to the divine or universal intelligence and truth. I really hope that this podcast episode had something for you, and I am definitely very excited to see you at our next live show. It will take place via Zoom. Check the text here for this podcast and just really join us. For anyone who would definitely like to get a short, snappy impulse from me, feel free to follow me on Instagram. There you will regularly and periodically find short, concise, and helpful tips that you can apply to your daily life, well-being, and awakening. With love and warmest affection, the very best and dearest wishes for you, your dear sister in spirit, your loving Linda.